Good to have you back on the show. Thanks for making the time.
Hi, Vashi.
I wanted to start off with the comments from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Our Prime Minister kind of referenced off the top of his statement that this doesn't come as a surprise, that the comments don't come as a surprise, but I think the reaction is because they're being, I guess, said out loud. What is your impression of the impact, the potential impact of these comments?
Yeah, I don't think it's a terribly big surprise. Benjamin Netanyahu was never a big supporter of the two-state solution. In recent weeks, he started talking about or bragging that he had helped to prevent the two-state solution from coming to fruition, and now he's just clearly against it. And it upends U.S. diplomacy in the region. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's been traveling all around the region trying to build support for a joint approach for Gaza once the fighting stops, but all of that is premised on Israel making good faith efforts to revive the peace agreements, the peace process. So this just upends U.S. diplomacy, a slap in the face, actually, to Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I think more so than anyone, this would appear to impact his potential posture on all of this, because he has made a big effort to communicate to the public that he is urging behind the scenes there to be a lower death toll in Gaza, for example, for there to be efforts towards, as you point out, the two-state solution. What does this do to his positioning going forward, do you think?
Well, Israel has taken steps that the U.S. was asking for, including starting to shift the nature of the military operation, they say, towards a more targeted, less destructive mission. We'll see for sure in expanding the provision of humanitarian aid. But there's no question that there is real tension between the U.S. president and the Israeli prime minister, not just on this particular issue, but on other issues, including the fact that Israel is holding on to the tax receipts of the Palestinian Authority, and the U.S. has been calling for that to be released. I think that this creates a bit of a standoff between Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu, and Netanyahu has thrown he sees his political survival as attached to the right-wing parties that he's become attached to, and they're dead set against a two-state solution. So it puts the United States in a very difficult position.
Do you think there's any possibility of lessening of U.S. support for Israel?
I think more likely would be that the United States may take something like the prospect of a normalization of Israel's relations with Saudi Arabia, which was under discussion before October 7th, which Israel really wants. But Saudi Arabia has made it clear as recently as just today that if that's going to happen, there has to be a clear pathway towards a Palestinian state. So that is a big carrot to be dangled, not just in front of the Netanyahu government, but potentially going around Netanyahu directly to the Israeli people. We'll see.
We will see. I want to switch gears, because though this is obviously being discussed by the government in this country, there's almost a foreign policy matter more proximus and more pressing to them that's going to be on the table, one of the three top things on the agenda for the cabinet retreat this weekend, and that is how to navigate going forward under the possibility, maybe probability of not only a Republican nominee for president in Donald Trump, but perhaps even president again. If cabinet sat you down and said, what should we do? What would you tell them?
Well, first off, I mean, let's not underestimate the threat that this poses to Canada. I think there's no other way to describe it. 4 years of Donald Trump was a three-alarm fire in itself, and I think that we could only realistically expect worse the next time, because there will be fewer adults in the room to restrain him, and he will be more angry and more vindictive than before. So, the government of Canada has to be prepared for all contingencies. And I think that, the election's still months away, but it's not too early to begin that homework. And that homework, I think, involves work in the United States, here in Canada, and overseas. In the U.S., you want to establish relationships with the people immediately around Trump, and that cast of characters has changed somewhat. Here in Canada, you want to start the process over the course of this year, rebuilding that kind of Team Canada approach just in case it's needed. And then you want to be talking to allies overseas very quietly because if Trump is elected, then an institution like NATO might be at risk, and we'll want to cooperate with like-minded partners to try and preserve it.
Just quickly following up on the idea of sort of trying to acclimate yourself or get to know those who are around Trump. Everything I've seen and read shows a real distinguishment between that group of people, years ago when the first efforts to do so were underway and were largely successful, and now there's basically fewer voices around him trying to regulate and normalize what he does. How much of a challenge will that be to navigate?
Well, for Canada, that will be a challenge to navigate on a number of different levels. Recall that after the 2016 election, I mean, Trump's victory was a surprise to everyone, including, I think, to Donald Trump himself. And but the Canadian government did a really excellent job of, doing some fast work to establish contacts with people around Trump and to build and maintain those contacts over those 4 years. So the challenge now is to do the same thing, but some of these characters are pretty unsavory. So it's not like you want to go out in January and start knocking on doors and say, "Hi, I'm the government of Canada. I'd like to talk to you about January 6th." The time will come, I think, depending on what's happening politically in the United States, where you're going to want to build those relationships up, not just with the people around Trump, but with prospective cabinet nominees as well.
Okay, Professor Paris, I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time and your insights this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.